This broadcast is brought to you courtesy of amateur radio station VK7AX in Ulverstone, northwest Tasmania.
On the air on the amateur radio bands all around the world, and streaming on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with our special Field Day edition, number 1321, of This Week in Amateur Radio. ARRL 2024 Field Day is here. We will have some last-minute tips to make your field day a successful one. A popular electronics store in Massachusetts is closing its doors. We will have the details. The FCC hits a computer manufacturer with a substantial fine for overpower Wi-Fi routers. The South African Radio League is already working toward World Radio Conference 2027. The new extra-class question pool is released. Germany unveils the exams for its new N-class license. There will be a host of presentations and retail vendors at the upcoming Northeast Ham Exposition. The new Starliner spacecraft brings another amateur operator to the International Space Station. NASA announced that Voyager 1 is back in service, but how much longer can the spacecraft survive? We will have the details. AMSAT announces that its mail alias service will end on August 1st. The Alexanderson Alternator SAQ will once again transmit a message on June 30th. And, have you ever played poker via FT8? Well, one group of amateurs are. We will have the story on how you can play games in this popular digital mode. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Anno Benchop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will take a look at identity in amateur radio. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This time out, we discover that vacuum tubes revolutionized radio, changing it more than any other single invention. He will have a close-up look at Lee DeForest and the Audion. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, our special Field Day 2024 edition, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our slightly overheated studio at our headquarters just outside Albany, New York, I am W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY. And I hope everyone taking part in Field Day tomorrow will have a great time and make lots of contact.
And reporting this week from the ham shack of K2MST, inside the Museum of Science and Technology in downtown Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And coming to you from our news bureau in the capital city of Albany, New York, where the weather this year will not be keeping this operator inside the house. I'm Mike LaMontagne, KE2AWY.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where it's officially summer, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And reporting from the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the neighbor's sweet corn is already beginning to show tassels, which means the corn will be ready in about 2 weeks. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where the mercury is tickling the top of the thermometer, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, as our lead story, here is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
Leading off our news this week, Field Day 2024 is upon us, and it is your chance to operate in the largest on-air event of the year. Across North America, clubs and individuals will be calling CQ Field Day. Seasoned hams and brand new licensees will be on the air looking to make your contact. Get with your club or friends and join the fun. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with a few important points to remember on Field Day.
Well, this weekend, June 22nd through the 23rd, is 2024 ARRL Field Day. The premier amateur radio event of the year is meant to be ham radio's open house, as well as a time for the amateur community to get together and practice operating under unusual conditions. ARRL wants this to be a memorable and safe year for your club. Here are the top 10 things your club should do during ARRL Field Day. Number 1, have a GO-TO station. It stands for Get on the Air, and that's exactly what it's meant for people to do. Number 2, have a designated greeter. If you've done things right in the publicity area, you should have visitors from local officials to people just curious about radio at your activation site. Number 3, have a sign-in sheet. You've gotten them to show up. Now find out who they are to follow up. Number 4, ensure proper hydration. Much of the country has been experiencing a heat wave this week. Make sure everyone at your location is drinking plenty of water. Number 5, make sure you read the ARRL Field Day rules. Don't miss out on opportunities for points. Number 6, have a copy of the 2024 Field Day Guide from the June 2024 issue of QST. Double check your equipment before the event starts. That's rule number 7. Number 8, keep a good log. While ARRL Field Day is not a contest, it's a fun way to get together to get a taste of radio sport. And number 9, take and share photos and videos. This is a great opportunity to show your friends, family, and community what amateur radio is all about. And to be featured on the ARRL Facebook page, send a photo of you operating at your site to social media at arrl.org. And number 10, remember to have fun. If you're not enjoying it, what is the point? Retorted ARRL Field Service Manager Mike Walters, W8ZY. Field Day is the highlight of many amateurs' operating year. And remember that all of the resources that a club needs to have a successful operation are at www.arrl.org/field-day. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Remember that Field Day is the highlight of many amateurs' operating year. Bring a fun, positive attitude to the event, and it will become contagious. This is meant to be an enjoyable hobby. Keep that in perspective and enjoy it. And the ARRL has announced the Field Day banner giveaway winners. 2 lucky hams have each won a 2024 ARRL Field Day banner in a giveaway. Eric Bauer, KD8EPR of Georgetown, Ohio, and Tracy Laudenslager, KO4RRT of Ocala, Florida, each have the banners to hang proudly at their activations this weekend.
Another beloved electronics retailer in the United States is closing its doors. 75 years ago, businessman John Ahidjian opened the doors of his new business, the You Do It Electronics Center in Needham, Massachusetts. Its highly visible neon sign was well known among hobbyists and those in search of buying electronics and electronic parts. The businessman died in 2022 at the age of 94. But the store, which employed many of John Ahidjian's family members, continued to attract loyal shoppers. Apparently, the draw wasn't enough. On June 13th, the business sent customers an email announcing it would be shutting down later this year. According to the website Boston.com, which carried the news, customers went on social media to lament the impending loss, telling stories about how they would seek out tips, advice, and spare parts at the store. The website quoted one longtime customer, Alex Giraldi, who called the business a better version of what Radio Shack was back in the day. The website also quoted Stuart Brorson, an electrical engineering professor at Northeastern University, who blamed the internet for the store's demise, saying that larger retail outlets are capable of overnight shipping on cheaper components and equipment. Until its doors close permanently, the store's inventory, office furnishing, and even its shelves will be offered for purchase at big discounts.
The United States Federal Communications Commission has proposed a fine of more than $367,000 against a major electronics manufacturer for selling Wi-Fi adapters and routers that the Commission believes were modified to exceed legal power limit. The report of the action against ASUS Tech Computer Incorporated was posted on the FCC website on Friday, June 14th. The equipment marking violation charges includes sanctions against ASUS Tech Computer, which is based in Taiwan, and ASUS Computer, the wholly owned affiliate that markets the routers in the United States. The Bureau's posting said it had a complaint from a purchaser of 3 model GT-AXE routers, and when they were tested by a certified laboratory, the authorized power exceeded the legal limits by between 4 and 9 dB, or nearly 8 times the legal power level on some frequencies. The notice of apparent liability noted that the company and the FCC entered into a consent decree following an investigation of similar violations involving Wi-Fi adapters and routers. The FCC posting did not include a statement from the company, nor was there a comment from ASUS Computer on the company's website.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at TWIAR.net.
From Wynyard to Waverley, Stanley to Scottsdale, this is VK7AX.
NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, has been making a concentrated effort to track and identify objects that might be high-altitude weather, research, or hobbyist radio balloons, such as those launched by amateur radio clubs and school groups. NORAD is now studying numerous websites to determine, as best it can, what balloons are flying over North America at any given time. U.S. fighter jets shot down 3 hobbyist balloons in 2023 after detecting and shooting down another high-altitude balloon, which the government department identified as a spy balloon from China. Stephen Armstrong, NORAD's chief of strategic engagement, told the military website Task and Purpose that NORAD is now taking a closer look at raw radar returns to ensure more hobbyist balloons don't meet the same fate. NORAD now reaches out to hobbyist or researcher groups when it is practical to do so. It seems to be working. Armstrong said that in April, NORAD confirmed there was a hobbyist balloon that had been launched but concluded it did not pose a threat.
Every 3 to 4 years, the International Telecommunications Union holds a World Radio Conference, commonly referred to as WRC, to manage the radio spectrum and review where new technologies fit in. The last WRC was in October and November last year, and the next one will be in 2027, hence WRC 27. The Department of Communication and Digital Technologies represents South Africa at these conferences, supported by experts from industry. To develop positions on the various agenda items, the department established the National Preparatory Working Group, at which experts from the department, industry, and academia develop the positions that are of the country's best interest and support the National Development Plan. On May 27th, the WRC 27 National Preparatory Working Group met in Pretoria. The South African Radio League was represented by Brian Jacobs, ZS6YZ, and Hans van de Gronendaal, ZS6AKV. On the World Radio Conference agenda, there are several items of interest to secure the future of amateur radio and developments not only in their ITU Region 2, but internationally.
If there is any doubt that amateur radio can help in an emergency, 2 Utah families have a story that will help change your mind. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with the tale.
On June 5th, Isaac Stiles, KJ7FAY, and his 3-year-old son were involved in a boating accident. Their canoe had tipped over at the Lost Dog confluence to the Flaming Gorge Reservoir. The initial emergency call was made by Stiles' wife, Kendall. She had to drive to nearby campsites until she found someone with a phone that worked, and then she made the call to the Green River Fire Department. She indicated both her husband and son were in the water, but could not be seen or located. The fire department first responders were able to locate Stiles and his son on the opposite side of the river. They were rescued by a Sweetwater County Sheriff's Department boat. Stiles' son needed ambulance transportation to a waiting AirMed helicopter, which would then take him to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah. Stiles said that once his son was loaded into the ambulance to meet the helicopter, he needed to call his mother to take care of his other son, but there was no cell phone service. So he turned on his mobile ham radio to a local repeater and was able to make contact with Zach Gunyon, KE7WYG. Gunyon made telephone contact with Stiles' mother and relayed critical information. He also went a few steps further and stayed on the phone to help calm and assure Mrs. Stiles that everything was going well. He took the rest of the day off from work, kept monitoring the repeater until Stiles was back in the area, and then went to the scene of the accident to help recover the boat and clean up the equipment. After the emergency telephone conversations with Gunyon, Mrs. Stiles thanked him for his help, to which he replied, "This is why I originally got into ham radio, to help just one person in an emergency." Stiles had a hard time of finding the words to thank Gunyon. He's always been a dependable person and helped in many amateur events, said Stiles. We're fast becoming good friends. Gunyon said he keeps his radio on most of the time, except when he's moving between locations and servicing computer networks. "I lose signal as I move from building to building," said Gunyon, "but on the day of the accident, I just happened to be at the right place where I could hear the call for help." I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Styles' son is now out of the hospital and on track to make a full recovery. Gunyon is an ARRL member and the current president of the Sweetwater Amateur Radio Club. He is an emergency management volunteer with the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office. Styles, secretary of the Sweetwater Club, is now working on a way to recognize Gunyon for his efforts during the accident.
The new amateur extra class question pool has been released and will be effective beginning July 1, 2024 through June 30 of 2028. The 2024 through 2028 pool is available as a Microsoft Word document and as a PDF. The 10 graphics required for the new extra class question pool are available within the documents or separately in PDF and JPEG formats. ARRL Volunteer Examiner Coordinator Manager Maria Soma, AB1FM, and member of the National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinator Question Pool Committee, said the pool includes significant changes compared to the 2020 through 24 version. We carefully went over the pool for technical accuracy, relevance to today's amateur radio practices, syntax, grammar style, format, and clarity and redundancy between the pools. With these goals in mind, 82 new questions were created and 101 questions eliminated, resulting in a reduction of the number of questions from 622 to 603. Over 350 questions were modified. We considered a question modified when the knowledge being tested was not changed, but wording was improved, or answers or distractors were replaced. Some advise that the newly revised pool must be used for amateur extra class licensing exam starting July 1 of 2024. New test designs will be available to ARRL volunteer examiners on that date. The ARRL VEC will supply its officially appointed field stock VE teams with new extra class exam booklet designs around the middle of June.
On June 15, 2024, a dozen New Hampshire Amateur Radio Emergency Service operators from the Mount Washington Valley Areas Group and the Central New Hampshire Areas Group, as well as a number of out-of-state areas volunteers, again provided emergency radio communications at the Delta Dental Mount Washington Road Race. 1,400 participants ran up the mountain into a region of infamous wind chill and low visibility. We were there to keep our eyes open for any runners having physical difficulties or medical issues, said Skip Cameo, AC1LC, who is the Public Information Coordinator for the ARRL New Hampshire section and the Public Information Officer for the New Hampshire Aries. This could have been done with cell phones, of course, but you can't count on having a good signal on Mount Washington. That's why the radio operators will be back for the August bike race up the mountain, added Cameo. The Aries help is also considered to be preparation for ARRL Field Day, with more than 35,000 radio amateurs gather with their clubs, groups, or simply friends nationwide to operate from remote public stations.
The ARRL Foundation is pleased to announce the return of the Club Grant Program for 2024. This is an opportunity for clubs to apply for grants up to $25,000 to fund projects in their community. Emphasis is given to clubs with projects that are of a transformational nature, a club that has a plan to improve the community through education, recruitment, training, and promotion of amateur radio. The application period is now open and will close on July 26th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This program is not restricted to ARRL-affiliated clubs or 501c3 clubs. We urge all clubs across the country to apply. Those who are awarded grants will be required to share updates and participate in social media and reporting with the ARRL. Information about the Club Grant Program can be found at www.arrl.org/club-grant-program. Now is the time to gather your club members and start thinking about how you could use this grant to make your community a better place through amateur radio.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at TWIAR.net.
Covering the world of amateur radio via VK7AX, Northwest Tasmania.
Working around multiple helium leaks and thruster problems, The crew of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft wrapped up a challenging rendezvous and a delayed but successful docking with the International Space Station Thursday, and a major milestone for the new ship's first piloted test flight. With Commander Barry Butch Wilmore and co-pilot Sunita Williams, KD-5PLB, monitoring the Starliner's automated approach, the Starliner's docking mechanism engaged its counterpart on the front of the station's forward Harmony module at 1734 UTC on June 8th, as the two spacecraft were sailing 260 miles above the Indian Ocean. After extensive checks to verify an airtight seal, hatches were opened and Wilmore and Williams floated into the lab complex to an enthusiastic welcome from the 7 Expedition 71 crew members. Cosmonauts Oleg Kononenko, RN-3DX, Nikolai Chubb, and Alexander Grebenkin, RZ-3DSE, along with NASA astronauts Matthew Dominic, KC-0TOR, Michael Barrett, KD-5MIJ, Jeanette Epps, KF-5QNU, and Tracy Dyson. Wilmore and Williams planned to spend about a week aboard this outpost before returning to Earth aboard the Starliner. While they're there, the station crew will install a replacement urine processor pump module that was loaded aboard the Starliner at the last minute to fix the lab's water recycling system and allow normal use of the toilet in the U.S. segment of the station. Running years behind schedule after multiple problems that cost Boeing some $1.4 billion to correct, the Starliner was launched Wednesday with a known helium leak in the system used to pressurize the spacecraft's propulsion system. Launch had been delayed a month in part because of work to confirm the ship could safely be launched with the leak as is. After reaching orbit, 2 more helium leaks developed that prompted flight controllers to close valves leading to the affected plumbing or manifolds, while they analyzed leak rates and potential workarounds. Closing the manifolds took down 5 of 28 reaction control system jets in the ship's service module and 3 of 20 more powerful OMAC thrusters. Docking had to be delayed because 5 RCS jets were deselected by the capsule's flight software when telemetry showed they were not performing exactly as expected. It was unclear if there would be sufficient maneuverability for the docking to proceed. Throughout the process, Wilmore flew the Starliner manually, holding position about 650 feet from the space station. When ground teams concluded the spacecraft had enough thruster redundancy to proceed, the Starliner's automated control system took over and flew the ship in for a problem-free docking. As if the team hadn't had enough problems to deal with, a 4th and a 5th helium leak were detected after docking. In any case, per standard procedure, flight controllers closed all the Starliner's helium manifolds after the link-up to prevent any residual leakage while attached to the station. Despite the leaks, NASA officials said more than enough helium remains on board to ensure a safe return to Earth at the end of a normal duration or even extended mission. On June 14th, NASA and the Boeing teams pushed back the target undocking and landing date for the Starliner spacecraft from the International Space Station by 4 days. They shifted from June 18th to now no earlier than June 22nd. The reason for the extended stay is in part due to a need to gather more information about the Starliner capsule, with the benefit of having an astronaut crew assigned to study aspects of the spacecraft, with the benefit of having an astronaut crew assigned to study aspects of the spacecraft with additional detail. The helium leaks are all located in the Starliner's drum-shaped service module, which is discarded to burn up in the atmosphere before the crew capsule re-enters for landing. Thus, there is no possibility of post-flight analysis of the problems.
Plans are shaping up for the 2024 Northeast Ham Exposition and New England Division Convention on August 22nd through the 25th, 2024 in Marlborough, Massachusetts. This year's convention will be held at the Best Western Royal Plaza Hotel and Trade Center, 181 Boston Post Road West, Marlborough, Massachusetts, 01752. This venue is located off of I-495 on Route 20 West. It offers many amenities and lots of nearby family-friendly attractions and dining options. The festivities kick off on Thursday evening, August 22nd, with entertainment provided by nationally known comedian Justin McKinney. Seating is limited to 250 people. Tickets are just $35 and also available as part of the Convention Plus package. Join your fellow hams for a delicious DXCC and contest banquet on Friday night with Yuri Onipko, VE3DZ, as he recaps his 50 years of DX and contesting activities and shares his operating experiences from a variety of locations around the world. Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, will present the keynote on Saturday morning. Steve leads ARRL's Education and Learning Department. He has a passion for youth outreach and works constantly to find ways to engage more youth in wireless technology and help teachers elevate their STEM programs. The Saturday evening grand banquet will feature special guest Dr. Tamitha Scove, WX6SWW. Known as Space Weather Woman in social media, Dr. Scove forecasts and analyzes space weather processes in the heliosphere and exosphere. Several new vendors will have their wares on display at the convention this year: Flex Radio, Elecraft, and Step IR Communications Systems. We'll also feature Halibut Electronics, Club Gear Online, Reliance Antennas, Remote Ham Radio, VE2DX Electronics, Gold Medal Ideas, AG Custom Gifts, and others. New for 2024 is Mini Contest University, based on K3LR's popular Contest University. CTU has been featured at the Dayton Hamvention since 2007 and has been presented in 15 countries to over 10,000 participants. Mini CTU is a series of contest-oriented talks and presentations offered at Ham Exposition all day Friday. Ham Exposition is pleased to offer a Parks on the Air track featuring presentations designed for both the newcomer and experienced POTA operators alike. There will be a functioning portable station operating on the hotel grounds designed to show beginners how to chase POTA contacts. In addition, an actual POTA activation will occur in a nearby state park following the prize drawing and closing ceremony. This year, volunteers will staff a special Get on the Air station, W1XPO, to mentor and assist newcomers in making their first HF contact. Our popular MCOM track will be back for 2024. Veteran emergency communicators will share their knowledge and experience to help others to up their game. In addition to talks and presentations, convention goers will get to see operational emergency communications vehicles on display in the parking lot. As always, the Northeast Ham Exposition will feature a robust flea market open to tailgaters on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. No major convention would be worth its salt without great prizes. Along with hourly drawings, we're pleased to announce that one lucky person will receive the grand prize, an ICOM IC705 QRP all-in-one transceiver. Second prize will be a Xiegu X6100 QRP HF 6-meter transceiver. The third prize will be an ICOM ID50A VHF UHF D-Star handheld. Tickets can be purchased in advance by visiting ticketing.hamexposition.org. That's ticketing.hamexposition.org.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
This is Spectrum from the Northwest on VK7AX with relays on VHF and UHF.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the Hounds DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, the only source of real-time DX information, you can drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. By the time you're listening to this, the historic FT4GL DXpedition Glorioso will have gone QRT. The all-time new one days, June 14th and 16th, quote, bore fruit with many modest stations in the log. The objective was therefore fulfilled, end quote. The organizers added that, quote, it was an intense and sometimes difficult experience for both Merrick and the support team. We regret, as is often the case during radio activities in rare countries, to note a negative spirit, end quote, in some instances. At the same time, they said that we, quote, were warmly and from the bottom of our hearts thanking all people who have shown their gratitude and trust in us throughout this great adventure. We still have very important work to do, particularly with regards to the QSLs and QSO requests that we received. Please be patient as we process those requests, end quote. They concluded with a warm salute to Mark, who was alone in parallel with his job to maintain traffic for a little over 3 weeks, end quote. From my viewpoint, he did an absolutely terrific job, so hats off to Mark. This adventure was difficult for Mark, the support team, and all of the pilots led by F8FKI. However, the majority of our objectives have been achieved. More than 60,000 QSOs, the last of which was IW4 EGP, an overall unique contact rate of 25%. Asia represented 21% of the log, North America 20% of the log. All bands and modes announced were used. Only the 160 meters band was not satisfactory. And anytime you can have a great distribution like that throughout the world, you're doing a terrific job. Finally, the entire team warmly thanks all of the sponsors, which includes clubs, associations, professionals, and individuals, without whom nothing would have been possible. If you would like to listen to some pre-DXpedition planning and conversation about this Glorioso DXpedition, check out episode 36 of the DX Mentor podcast and YouTube channel. Multiple 6-meter FT8 contacts have been made from E5-S, the South Cook Islands, reported ZL1RS Bob. He is on the north side of Rarotonga Island, operating as E51EME through June 25th. His emphasis is on 6 meters, but he may show up occasionally on 10. He will only operate on FT8 and Q65, normal mode, when on 6 meters EME. He is running an ICOM IC705 and a homebrew kilowatt with 2 3-element stacked Yagis on 6 meters and 10 watts to a wire antenna on 10 meters. Locally, Joe W2XBS was able to get E51 EME in his log from Southwest Ohio. QSOs will be uploaded to Club Log and Logbook of the World. Paper confirmation can be received through ZL1RS. The 3 Delta 2 Zulu Rotuma DXpedition is scheduled for November 15th through December 4th. Team member Nathan, K4NHW, has created a website with information about the DXpedition, the team, the operating plans, and the island, and how you can support their effort. The team has a new member, 23-year-old K9 LSV Connor, a Bradley University alumnus who is now an electrical engineer. He's a member of the Society of Midwest Contesters and has operated from the K9 CT Superstation. This experience gave him an appreciation of how big the amateur radio community actually is. The Northern California DX Foundation, or NCDXF, has announced its financial support for 3 Delta 2 Zulu. This DXpedition is led by Greg, W6IZT, and Hal, W8HC, and features 2 important NCDXF interests, youth involvement in DXpeditions and the rig-in-the-box concept. And I'm telling you, those guys will do a terrific job. I know them well, and I can't wait to hear those guys on the air. Seeking to promote Youth on the Air, or YOTA, activity, Team J62K is looking for team players between the ages of 18 and 30, eager to experience the thrill of endless pileups from St. Lucia. They are especially looking for first-time travelers to experience operating in a multi-category environment during the CQ WPX contest single sideband next March 25th to April 1st, which is 2025. Interested applicants must hold a valid amateur radio license and passport and must be team players. Duties include station antenna setup and teardown, as well as cooking, cleaning, and other tasks. The organizers say, quote, "Sorry it's not a family vacation, but you will have a great time. Eat lots of food, laugh, joke, work big pile-ups, and make new lifelong fans." You can contact me, the dxmentor@gmail.com, for the application form. Le Moy, France was one of the first places to be liberated in the Allied invasion of southern France in August of 1944, nearly 80 years ago. The special call sign TM80LM has been issued to mark the 80th anniversary of this military operation. The station will be based at the Musée de la Libération and will be on the air August 15th to the 18th. It will be supported by a group from Amersfoort, Netherlands. M0CFW Kaz plans to operate both weekends of the CQ Worldwide DX contest from 3 Baker 9, Rodriguez Islands. He will be there from October 22nd to the 30th, and again from November 17th to 27th. During the contest, he will be using call sign 3 Baker 9 kilowatt as a single operator, all-band, high-power effort. Outside the contest, he will sign 3 Baker 9 stroke M0CFW, and you can QSL via LOTW. From West Malaysia, we can report that 9 Mike 4 TOTA will be active from June 28th to the 29th from Teluk Gadong Beach, and there will be a special event station for Terengganu on the air, highlighting interesting tourism places throughout the state of Terengganu. They will be active on 80 through 10, CW, sideband, and FT8. That will be a great opportunity to get West Malaysia in the log. And finally, the latest episode of the DX Mentor has been posted and is now available wherever you get your podcast and on the DX Mentor YouTube channel. The discussion this week is with K6TD Kevin and is focused on the Northern California DX Foundation. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, thanks to my wife Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.
Coming up next, This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
A long-standing member service, the AMSAT Mail Alias Service, is scheduled to end on October 1st. A mail alias on amsat.org permitted people to send an email to members without knowing their actual internet email address. They just needed to know their amateur radio call sign. Unfortunately, the unchecked rise of domain name hacking and email account hijacking has made it impossible to sustain this service at a cost-effective level. The number of call sign at amsat.org email accounts that's been hijacked and converted to zombie spam accounts over the years has led many internet service providers and gateway centers to ban all AMSAT.org email addresses, including those business accounts of AMSAT officials and others. The tireless efforts of AMSAT's all-volunteer IT staff has worked for years to repair much of the damage, but AMSAT still gets complaints from members who aren't getting their personal emails, bulletins, or posts because of persistent delivery problems. It's come to the point where AMSAT volunteer IT staff can no longer keep up with the maintenance requirements to keep the alias mail list clean and to work with email gateways to remove blocks. And after considerable investigation into alternative paid email services, AMSAT leadership has decided that the money required to keep an email alias system alive would be better spent on building and flying satellites for its members. Persons using the email services should begin to migrate to different email accounts so they don't lose receipt of personal emails, AMSAT News Service weekly bulletins, posts, or other official messages. Members are especially asked to make sure they are not using a call sign at amsat.org as their registered email address in the AMSAT membership portal. Members can easily change their registered email addresses by logging into the portal and updating their profile.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
From Wynyard to Waverley, Stanley to Scottsdale, this is VK7AX.
Welcome to the 11th segment of Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. I want to express my appreciation to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his superb website in the preparation of these programs. So, enjoy this chapter of ham radio history. The Audion. Vacuum tubes revolutionized radio, changing it more than any other single invention. When first introduced, however, even the scientists and engineers working on them did not fully understand how they worked. One of the first tubes to appear in QST was the Audion by DeForest. Although it had been introduced back in 1905, it was expensive, and amateurs did not begin to use it until 7 years later, when 22-year-old Edwin Armstrong demonstrated its practical use as a regenerative detector. In the very first issue of QST, tucked in the back on page 22, a teaser stated that the next issue would be a wonder containing, among other things, information on the newest technology, the Audion detector. So, in January 2016, Tuska published the lead article, The Oscillating Audion, about using a vacuum tube as a detector. For the technical on the valve, he referred the reader to Armstrong's writings where the principles of regenerative reception were presented in full. The idea, he explained, was to combine an incoming signal with the signal of an oscillation in the tube, producing an audible beat note. Interestingly, when he referred to frequency, he didn't use the phrase cycles per second, but simply a frequency of 100,000 per second. Lacking a fundamental understanding of why it did what it did, he took an experimenter's approach and advised operators to play around with the adjustments until they found the right settings to receive signals. He reported that signals from professional stations over 5,000 miles away had been received by an East Coast ham using the Audion. As hams began to experiment with the Audion, the QST editor asked for anyone experienced with it to send in details for publication. The March editorial claimed that 90% of amateurs did not know how to use it properly. As an expensive luxury, hams could not afford to be burning them out, as was the tendency. It was widely known, however, that the most effective stations were using Audion detectors. Some hams were even using them to receive continuous wave signals, considered a potentially important development in radio should it be shown to be practical, despite the DeForest Company disapproving the use of the Audion this way. Perhaps answering this call for help, the lead article in the same issue, March Radio Bulletin, was Practical Pointers on the Audion, written by A.B. Cole, electrical engineer and sales manager at the DeForest Radio Tell and Tell Company. It was the first authoritative paper about vacuum tube technology to appear in the magazine. Filling 4 full pages, complete with a picture of the author, the article was the longest yet to be published in QST. Cole devoted 4 full paragraphs to establishing his credibility as an authority, while yet a true member of the amateur radio community. His opening sentence stated that his purpose in writing was not to sell Audions, but to assist those who use the justly famous Audion to obtain the best results. Maybe he thought it necessary to write this because his sales title was in the byline, but he probably also intended to attract more buyers despite this disclaimer. He professed to want to set the record straight, asserting that much had been written in error about the Audion without authority of the patentees. Although he had been working professionally in the field, he considered himself an amateur radio pioneer, having been active since 1904, experienced with the Audion since 1908, and was firmly an amateur at heart, whereas he claimed many commercial radio types were known to look down on amateurs. He also admitted that despite extensive experience with Audions, he did not know it all, unlike many less experienced authors, in his estimation, who nevertheless seemed able to write whole books on the subject. No 2 Audion bulbs were exactly alike, he explained. implying a lack of control in the manufacturing process, and therefore it required careful circuit design and especially careful layout to get good results from them. According to Cole, this was one reason the company did not sell them separately from the complete detector. It's fair to assume that they also made more money on the detector than on the Audion alone. Moreover, removing the Audion from the detector, as many apparently did for experimentation, caused the guarantee to be immediately dissolved. He cited an example of an amateur who had installed one in his own cabinet, could not get it to work after substituting parts, blamed it on the Audion, and sent it back. The company discovered it to be in perfect working order when used in the proper detector. There were two grades of Audion, S and X. S was the regular grade, having passed a test of sensitivity to weak signals when compared with a standard, the most sensitive crystal detector available. X-grade bulbs were ones that exhibited significantly higher sensitivity than the standard. Between 1 and 10% of a production run might be designated X-grade. Cole claimed that this method of testing using a practical receiving situation was more meaningful than theoretical testing, which he oddly defined as inferring performance solely by measuring terminal characteristics. He also stated that the DeForest Company's chosen testing apparatus consisted of standard amateur equipment so as to not bias the results by using equipment specially designed for the Audion. This appears to contradict his previous statement about the need for greater care in designing such circuits, but it may be that he simply meant standard properly designed amateur equipment. The four most common troubles with Audions all stemmed from wiring batteries improperly or using batteries that were too depleted, wrote Mr. Cole. This is reminiscent of troubleshooting charts in manuals today that begin by asking if the unit is plugged in and the power is turned on, because many times it isn't. The fifth had to do with lack of sensitivity at long wavelengths above 1,500 meters, which was attributed to inefficiencies in the typical tuner, not the Audion itself, of course. A quick break for identification purposes. You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
Covering the world of amateur radio via VK7AX, Northwest Tasmania.
The batteries were designated as A, the grid supply, B, the plate or wing supply, and the reason why B+ is commonly used to mean plate voltage, and the lighting battery for the filament. It was sometimes necessary to reverse the polarity of the lighting battery to get the circuit to work, though no reason was given in the article. Perhaps no cause was known to Cole or the company. A tuner was properly operated by adjusting the voltages for maximum weak signal sensitivity while listening. The objective was to first obtain some zero signal background sound, hiss, then back off on the filament to extend the Audion's life while leaving it set at a critical point of maximum sensitivity. Some fallacies need correcting, he wrote. You cannot use a detector bulb to build an amplifier. They are entirely different functions. You cannot operate detectors in excess of their ratings in order to get more gain as an amplifier or for other purposes. You'll just burn them out faster. Thus, after establishing his credentials as a true amateur, he proceeded to discourage experimenting, the very essence of amateur radio, at least as far as the Audion was concerned. The article included a picture of a DeForest RJ6 receiving set. It had 4 controls, and the Audion bulb was mounted on the front panel on the outside of the cabinet. As the center of attention, after all, it was the single active element. This mounting scheme permitted the operator to watch it glow and adjust the filament visually. Later in the same issue, a half-page ad from the wireless manufacturing company, DeForest Company, appeared for the first time. Big bold letters announced a new receiving set, a complete receiver based on the Audion. It claimed to be the lowest-priced high-quality set ever offered for sale. A full-page ad by DeForest Radio Telephone and Telegraph Company of New York City also appears in the same issue. Their RJ8 model sold for $25 and the RJ9 model for $14, both without AB battery, batteries not included. This was roughly $530 and $300 respectively in 2012. The main improvement was the replacement of the high-voltage step switch selector with a potentiometer, an improvement called for in the previous month's article. 2 months later, Cole wrote a short follow-up article, an Audion Hint, in which he described how to make a high-value resistor with paper, pencil line, and rubber block to serve as a high-resistance leak between plate and grid to prevent temporary paralyzing of the Audion due to static discharge at the antenna. Picking up where Cole and Tuska had left off, Paul Godley of the RCA wrote the first in-depth article about circuit design, with the Audion being one of the first to explore its use on short wavelengths. Filling nearly 8 pages, Godley methodically presented receiving circuits of increasing complexity, ranging from the 1-tube simple regenerative detector up to a 4-tube receiver that employed 3 steps of audio amplification and interstage transformers, ignoring with gusto Cole's admonition against using the Audion for anything other than detection. Godley would later play an important role in the development of the short waves and equipment for using them. Included in this material are quotes from the following: C. Tuska, The Oscillating Audion, QST, January 1916, page 3. Editorial QST, March 1916, page 57. A.B. Cole, Practical Pointers on the Audion, QST, March 1916, page 41. P.F. Godley, Applications of the Audion, QST, August 1916, page 193. With thanks to W2PA Chris Cadella for allowing us the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The ARRL is not the only membership organization to have suffered an attack on its website recently. On May 30th, the Society of Broadcast Engineers had its website content and pages removed by malware, according to an earlier SBE announcement. On June 5th, an updated article posted on RadioWorld.com said that the malware has since been removed and the SBE's website is back up and running. The SBE said it was able to restore its website content from a backup. The Society assured members that none of their data had been compromised, and they are now running scans to verify that any remnants from the attack have been eradicated. The SBE comprises 116 chapters and more than 4,500 members who work in the broadcast and multimedia technology fields.
ARDC, that's Amateur Radio Digital Communications, has announced Ashhar Farhan, VU2ESE, joined their board of directors. Licensed initially at the age of 15 and fascinated with electronics as a child, Ashhar became interested in amateur radio after being hooked following a local club coming to his school to perform a ham radio demonstration. His technical contributions to amateur radio have earned him inductions into both the QRP Amateur Radio Club International Hall of Fame and the CQ Ham Radio Hall of Fame. Throughout his career, VU2ESE has worked in the fields of Internet telephony, free software, and voice codecs. As entrepreneur, not only has Farhan founded HF Signals, he has also co-founded La Makan, a cultural center in Hyderabad, as well as Exceed Satellites, which specializes in building satellites. To date, they have launched 2 amateur radio carrying satellites into space. In addition to founding these companies, he is an angel investor in various technology startups. Amateur Radio Digital Communications' mission is to support, promote, and enhance digital communication and broader communication science and technology, to promote amateur radio, scientific research, experimentation, education, development, open access, and innovation in information and communication technology.
The unique Alexanderson alternator from 1924 with the call sign SAQ, is scheduled for 2 transmissions on VFL 17.2 kHz CW on June 30th, 2024. Almost 100 years ago, December 1st, the long-wave transmitter at Grimerton radio station with the call sign SAQ was put into commercial operation. Transmissions were across the Atlantic Ocean to a receiving station in Riverhead and with the replying transmitter station in Rocky Point, both on Long Island, New York, USA. The other transmitting and receiving stations in the RCA network are now long gone, but the SAQ has been preserved as a World Heritage Site and is still operational. The design and manufacturing of such a robust and reliable radio transmitter was a monumental achievement by Swedish-born inventor Ernest F.W. Alexanderson. Listeners and readers in Europe have been suggested that to receive the message, you can try using a wire as long as possible connected to the microphone socket of a laptop or PC sound card. The sound card can then be used as a receiver, allowing you to try to receive the transmissions.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
This is Spectrum from the Northwest on VK7AX with relays on VHF and UHF.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The recent incident at the ARRL, in which it disclosed that it was the victim of a sophisticated network attack by a malicious international cyber group, brings into focus some serious questions around our community in relation to identity and privacy. Let's start with your call sign. Right now, in Australia, you can use the official register to look for VK6FLAB. When you do, you'll discover that it's assigned to Foundation. That's it. No mention of who holds it, where it's registered, or how to contact the holder. None of that. In the case of my call sign, because I haven't surrendered my apparently now legally useless license, you can still search the previous system, the Register of Radio Communications Licenses, and discover that it's held by me. But as soon as it expires, that record will vanish, and the relationship between me and my call sign will be lost to the public. Also, there are no dates associated with any of this. You cannot use the current or previous system to discover if I held my call sign in November 2010 or not. In case you're wondering, no, I didn't. I was licensed a month later. Right now, if you look for Victor Kilo 6 Echo Echo November on QRZ.com, you'll see that it's linked to Charlie Tango 1 Echo Echo November. But when was that information last updated? I know for a fact that I became the holder in November 2020. It appears that Sam, Charlie Tango 1, Echo Echo November, used it around the turn of the century, about 24 years ago, but precisely when and for how long is unclear. So, from a public disclosure perspective, the links between me and my call signs are tenuous at best. Before I continue, I will point out that this is not unusual. For example, you can see the number plate on my car as I drive down the street, but most people don't have the ability to link it to me. Similarly, Ofcom in the United Kingdom released a list of allocated amateur call signs after a Freedom of Information request. It's unclear if this information is updated or if it requires a new request each time. Like Australia, the dataset contains the call sign, the type of license, and when the record was last updated. Nothing else. In contrast, the United States has a full license search that returns name, address, issue, and expiry dates. Japan offers both a search tool and downloads. Interestingly, you can see if a call sign was previously licensed and when, but not by whom. No doubt, each country has their own interpretation in relation to how this is handled, and as was the case in Australia, this is ever-changing. This leaves us with an interesting phenomenon. We use call signs on air to identify ourselves, but the relationship between the call sign and our identity, let alone when, is not guaranteed for a significant proportion of the amateur community. So, how does this relate to the ARRL incident? Radio amateurs like to make contacts with each other and collect those contacts like you might collect stickers or postage stamps. For decades we've used QSL cards, essentially a postcard sent from one amateur to another, to confirm a contact. When you collect enough cards, you can apply for an award, like the DXCC, showing that you made contact with 100 different so-called DX entities. In the era of computing, some organizations, like the ARRL, came up with the idea of using the Internet to exchange these contacts instead of using a postcard. This reduced delays and was presented as a system to make the process more secure, by requiring that people electronically sign their contacts, but could only do so after identifying themselves using traditional means, like providing copies of their license, their passport, etc. The ARRL called it Logbook of the World, or LOTW, and it was adopted by the amateur community around the globe. While the ARRL continues to state that it only holds public information on its member database, it has made no such assurances about the LOTW system. There is personal and private information that the ARRL has, and there is no indication at all what happened to it. Other systems, such as QRZ, EQSL, Clublog and Hamlog, offer similar systems with various levels of authentication and verification. A new player, HQSL, is confusing the issue by offering cryptographically signed QSL cards, boasting that their system is decentralized and not restricted to any single service, but immediately requires that you sign up with Hamlog to get going. So we have several organizations offering electronic logging, contact confirmation and security, which claim to guarantee that this call sign contacted that call sign at a time and date on a band using a mode. One problem. None of this is real. For starters, there is no guarantee that the station operating Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo was me. There is also no record guaranteeing that I'm the holder of Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo, or any proof that I am who I say I am. There is also no guarantee that the person confirming a contact between Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo and you is me. So we're creating a phantom secure system that's attempting to fix the wrong problem. In golf, when you start playing for rankings, rather than a round at the 19th hole, the process used to verify your score is dependent on peer review. You cannot mark your own scorecard. Someone else does. In amateur radio, we've built this electronic house of cards to track whom we've talked to and when, but it's a mirage when looked at closely. While a DXCC award is worth nothing more than a personal achievement, we cannot go on pretending that identity verification services like LOTW are real, nor can we continue to accept that organizations like the ARRL should demand and store valuable identity information. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
SpaceX has received FCC clearance to operate a mysterious wireless module device, PC Magazine reported earlier this week, speculating that the device might be a new Starlink router. On Tuesday, the FCC issued an equipment authorization for the device, which uses the 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz Wi-Fi radio bands. A document in SpaceX's filing also says it features antennas along with Wi-Fi chips, apparently from MediaTek. Another document calls the device by the code name UTW-231 and defines it as a wireless router supporting IEEE 802.11 BGNAX for Wi-Fi 6 speeds up to 1300 megabits per second. But perhaps the most interesting part is an image SpaceX attached, which suggests the router is relatively small and can fit in a person's open hand. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has said that the Starlink mini dish is slated to arrive later this year and that it's small enough to fit in a backpack. On Wednesday, PC Magazine also spotted the official Starlink.com site referencing the name Mini in a specification page for the satellite internet system.
As ham radio Friedrichshafen prepares to welcome visitors from June 28 until the 30th, Germany itself is preparing to welcome the first amateur radio operators to hold that country's new Class N license. Candidates who have been studying for the big day can sit the Class N license exam at the Friedrichshafen, where the two of the earliest tests are being given on the 28th and 29th. A passing grade will give Germany's newest amateurs access to 70 centimeters, 2 meters, and 10 meters at a maximum power of 10 watts. The 47th edition of the International Radio Trade Fair, Europe's largest, takes its inspiration this year from the Islands on the Air Awards scheme, which was marking its 60th anniversary. The Youth Ham Camp and the Ham Rally are both returning, following their absence during the worldwide COVID pandemic. More than 300 commercial exhibitors and associations are expected to be on hand during the event.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air, This Week in Amateur Radio.
From Wynyard to Waverly, Stanley to Scottsdale, this is VK7AX.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Have you tried working someone through the repeater on the ISS? The latest update indicates that the crossband repeater continues to be active on 145.990 MHz up, with a PL tone of 67 and 437.800 MHz down. Remember, if any crew member is so inclined, all they have to do is pick up the microphone, raise the volume up, and talk on the crossband repeater. There is no reason to call for NA1SS. They cannot hear you unless they decide to operate and turn up the volume. If so, you will know they are there, as they will be the strongest signal. The packet system is also active on 145.825 MHz up and down. The ham TV and SSTV systems are currently stowed. As always, if there is an EVA, a docking, or an undocking, the RS radios are turned off as part of the safety protocol. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly solar weather and propagation forecast report. Brought to us each week by Tad Cook, K7RA in Seattle, Washington. Sunspot numbers rose this week, with the average changing from 139.4 to 149.6, but average daily solar flux only shifted from 179.2 to 178. Only 4 sunspot groups emerged this week, 1 on June 15th and 3 on June 19th. The average daily planetary A index changed from 11.6 to 10.3. This weekend is ARRL Field Day, and the forecast looks good, with high solar flux at 200 and 190. Looking at the predicted solar flux for the near term, shows a value of 200, 190, and 185 on June 22nd through the 24th, then 190 on June 25th and 26th, 180, 190, 180, and 185 on June 27th through June 30th, and then 190, 195, 190, 185, and 190 on July 1st through the 5th. The predicted planetary A index for near term will be 12 and 10 on June 22nd through the 23rd, then 5 on June 24th through the 29th, 8 on June 30th to July 1st, then hold steady at 5 on July 2nd through the 14th.
In radio sport this week, June 20th through the 21st, it's the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest, that is CW. On June 20th, the NTC QSO party, CW there as well. June 22nd and 23rd, it's His Majesty King of Spain contest, single sideband phone. June 22nd through 23rd as well, the ARRL Field Day, that's CW phone and digital. On June 26th, the SKCC Sprint, that's CW. And on June 27th, it's the RSGP 80-meter Club Championship, that's single sideband and phone. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on July 12th and 13th, it's HamCon Zion, sponsoring the ARRL Rocky Mountain Division Convention, that's in St. George, Utah. July 13th, the SVARC Summer Ham Fest, sponsoring the ARRL North Dakota Section Convention in Minot, North Dakota. And on July 20th, it's the SEARC Tailgate Ham Fest, sponsoring the ARRL South Dakota State Convention, that's in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
NASA engineers have succeeded in breathing new life into Voyager 1, the spacecraft launched in 1977 and once again communicating after it went silent 7 months ago. But now comes another challenge, keeping Voyager 1 scientifically useful for as long as possible, as it probes a realm where no spacecraft has gone before. Voyager 1 and its twin Voyager 2 are treasured at NASA not only because they have sent home an astonishing image of the outer planets, but also because in their dotage they are still doing science that can't be readily duplicated. They are now in interstellar space, far beyond the orbits of Neptune and Pluto. Voyager 1 is more than 15 billion miles from Earth, and Voyager 2 nearly 13 billion miles. Both have passed the heliopause, where the solar wind of particles streaming from the sun terminates. They're going someplace where we have nothing, we have no information, NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy said. We don't know anything about the interstellar medium. Is it a highly charged environment? Are there a lot of dust particles out there? Even as the Voyagers continue their journeys, engineers and scientists at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, are mourning the loss of Ed Stone, the scientist who guided the mission from 1972 until his retirement in 2022. Stone, a former director of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, died June 9th at the age of 88. Voyager 1 has 4 scientific instruments still operational in this extended phase of its mission, but it suddenly ceased sending intelligible data on November 14, 2023. A Tiger team of engineers at JPL spent the ensuing months identifying the problem, a malfunctioning computer chip, and restoring communication. What no one can change, though, is the mortality of a spacecraft with a limited power supply. Voyager 1 is running on fumes, or more precisely, on the dwindling power from the radioactive decay of plutonium. The Voyagers use a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, but an RTG doesn't last forever. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 will eventually go silent as they continue to cruise the galaxy. At some point, we'll have to start turning off the science instruments one by one, project scientist Linda Spilker said. Once we're out of power, then we can no longer keep the spacecraft pointed at the Earth. And so the Voyagers will then continue as what I like to think of as our silent ambassadors. In a sense, this is all a bonus because the primary mission for the 2 Voyagers was the exploration of the outer planets. Both visited Jupiter and Saturn, and Voyager 2 went on to Uranus and Neptune in what was known as the Grand Tour of the Outer Solar System, enabled by a rare orbital arrangement of the planets. The Voyagers delivered spectacular close-up images of the outer planets, and the mission ranks among NASA's greatest achievements. The gravitational slingshot from the planetary encounters sent Voyager 1 out of the elliptical plane of the solar system and did the same to Voyager 2 in a different direction. About 4 years ago, Voyager 1 encountered something unexpected, a phenomenon scientists have dubbed a pressure front. Jamie Rankin, deputy project scientist, said the instruments on the spacecraft picked up a sudden change in the magnetic field of the interstellar environment, as well as a sudden increase in the density of particles. What exactly caused this change remains unknown, but NASA scientists are eager to get all the data flowing normally again to see whether the pressure front is still detectable.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from All Over. First up this week, the U.S. spacewalk planned for Thursday, June 13th at the International Space Station did not proceed as scheduled due to a spacesuit discomfort issue. NASA astronauts Tracy Dyson and Matthew Dominic, KC-0TOR, completed taking off their spacesuits about an hour before the crew was anticipated to exit the Quest airlock. With consideration to NASA's Boeing crew flight test and other spaceflight operations, the next spacewalk will be Monday, June 24th, followed by another on Tuesday, July 2nd, as was previously planned. The June 24th spacewalk will focus on radio frequency group hardware removal, while the content of the July 2nd spacewalk is under evaluation and will be shared as available. The crew members on the station are healthy, and spacesuits are functioning as expected. Next up comes the news that Russian cosmonaut and ISS commander Oleg Konenko became the first person to reach 1,000 cumulative days in space as of June 4th. The milestone comes amid his 5th flight to space and during his 3rd stint as the commander of the ISS. His most recent trip to the orbiting laboratory began with a launch aboard the Soyuz MS-24 spacecraft on September 15, 2023, alongside cosmonaut Nikolai Chubb and NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara, KI-5TOM. He's scheduled to return with Chubb and NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson in September 2024. And finally this week, SpaceX's enormous rocket took off again from South Texas on June 6th, this time with the sole goal of bringing both the booster and ship softly back to Earth in roughly single pieces. An on-time launch of the world's most powerful rocket delivered excitement from start to finish. Despite an engine out on launch and landing with 33 engines total, Super Heavy doesn't care. The first stage was able to complete a nominal ascent, hot staging, temporary hot staging ring jettison, boost back, and landing burn, all with enough precision that previously deployed buoy cams were able to capture its soft splashdown.
You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at www.TWIAR.net.
Covering the world of amateur radio via VK7AX, Northwest Tasmania.
As an increasing number of satellites orbit the Earth, the $3 billion radio telescope being built in Western Australia's outback may need to find new ways to listen for faint radio signals. The number of satellites is expected to increase significantly in coming years, and for scientists who need the ground and the space above to be quiet, satellites and their booming loud radio interference are a significant challenge. When operational, the square-kilometre array radio telescope in Western Australia's Murchison region will detect and interpret faint radio signals from space via low frequencies and allow astronomers to see the birth of stars and galaxies. It's expected to be operational by 2030, when some experts are predicting up to 100,000 satellites will be orbiting. Dr. Chris Dupree is the Deputy Spectrum Manager for the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, which operates radio antennas across the U.S. He says the current situation is like trying to listen for whispers while satellites are yelling with bullhorns. Dr. Dupree said the observatory could no longer use some frequencies at its Greenbank facility in West Virginia, the largest steerable radio dish in the world, due to noise created by satellites. He said interference from the satellites was at the point where some scientists were scoping beyond Earth for the next ideal radio astronomy location, with the moon looming as an ideal location. It sounds a little crazy, but these are real discussions. That's definitely considered by the International Telecommunications Union to be an important possibility, Dr. Dupree said. The current location was selected because they are pristine, away from humans and cities, away from FM radio transmitters, TV transmitters, electronics, he said. If you're choosing that site today, you need to take into account that there's a level of interference from space that you can't escape. What's the point of putting up a telescope in a pristine location, which is remote, difficult to work at, and expensive, when you can't escape the interference anyway?
Dara Gardner, KF0NIX, a member of the Pikes Peak Radio Amateur Association, has been accepted to the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship Program. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more in this report from ARRL headquarters in Newington.
The AEF program provides a unique opportunity for accomplished K-12 educators in the fields of science, technology, and engineering, and mathematics, STEM, to serve in the national education arena. It's pretty exciting, said Gardner. I'm overwhelmed and honored. I've known about the Einstein program for a few years. The program invests a lot in the teachers, but the teachers get back tremendous amounts of professional development. It's also exciting that a person like me can have their voice heard on Capitol Hill. Gardner added that she is still learning how the whole process works, but she wants parents to have a choice about their children's education and to better prepare students for the workforce. As an AEF fellow, Gardner will serve on the House Committee on Education and the Workforce in Washington, D.C. Her 11th-month assignment will begin August 19th and run until July 2025. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Gardner is a teacher at the Thrive Homeschool Academy and helped establish a special program with amateur radio on the International Space Station, which brought Shuttle astronaut General Kevin Chilton and Shuttle and ISS astronaut Lieutenant General Susan Helms, KC7NHZ, to Harrison High School in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The highlight of the program was an amateur radio contact with astronaut Jeanette Epps on April 22, 2024, as the ISS passed over Stratton Meadows Elementary School. John Bloodgood, KD0SFY, Public Information Coordinator of the ARRL Colorado section and a member of the radio club, said Gardner is highly motivated and very energetic when it comes to working on STEM activities. She's a dedicated teacher and completed the ARRL Teachers Institute and brings a wealth of knowledge to the classroom, he added. For more information on the Albert Einstein Fellowship Program, visit science.osti.gov/WDTS/Einstein.
A unique special event open to all amateur radio operators will take place July 1 and run through November 30th of 2024. Station 0L80 Carbon will be activated to commemorate the 80th anniversary of a secret World War II mission known as Operation Carbon. The mission, with paratroopers trained by the British Special Ops Executive, dropped troops into occupied Czechoslovakia to conduct espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in German-occupied Europe and to aid local resistance movements. OL80 Carbon transmissions will be on most amateur bands and will be using any mode, but primarily CW. There will also be some sideband transmissions with Digi on all HF bands. Depending on propagation, a special paper QSL card will be available for every first QSO, regardless of band or mode. Any SWL reports via station OK2PXJ will be appreciated. For more information, visit OL80 Carbon at QRZ.com.
The third annual Meme Appreciation Month is being billed as not your average special event. Ben Rail, VA4BEN, a 17-year-old amateur radio operator who is graduating from high school this year, says the event was originally spurred out of an inside joke with a group of friends from both the Young Amateurs Radio Club and the Radio Amateurs of Canada Discord server. John Ross, KB8IDJ, is here with more.
Real says he hopes this event has risen to the next level. To us, the event is a way to express our group's feelings that special event call signs don't have to be serious. We want to show the goofy side of the hobby, something that could click with youth to potentially bring them to the hobby. Activity began June 15th and will run through August 15th. While many stations, particularly the American stations, will end operation on June 30th, there will be hams from 10 countries representing all 3 IARU regions participating with various special call signs and expiration dates, and some American stations going on later in that period. There will be DX and U.S. participants workable throughout the next 2 months, with activity peaking during the first month. Most stations will be operating primarily FT8, while some stations will be operating single sideband, CW, slow-scan TV on 20 meters. And there is also the possibility of a Hellschreiber activity. That's a facsimile-based teleprinter mode. Activity will be distributed across the bands, while ARC club member Jacob Humble, AI5ZK, added, "It's not every day that a bunch of youth from across the globe gets together to build a global fraternity and practice the radio art as a group to share what we love, and it's not every day that you pull it off a third year running. If you see us on there, show us some love and some work." I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
All of the information about Meme Appreciation Month, including who, and a listing of registered special event call signs, what, when, where, what mode, and where to QSL, is available on mememonth.ca.
The YASME Foundation is a non-profit corporation organized to conduct scientific and educational projects related to amateur radio, including DXing and the introduction and promotion of amateur radio in underdeveloped countries. Recently, the YASME Foundation announced its 2024 award winners. Congratulations to Rasa Skrinikova, R1 BIG, who is being honored by YASME for her YouTube channel, YL Rasa, which educates and entertains its more than 15,000 subscribers and spreads goodwill by welcoming newcomers to amateur radio. Other winners include Randy Hall, K7AGE, who is being recognized for his substantial library of YouTube videos, and has, according to Yasmi, exemplifies the ham radio mentor. Rudy Severn's N6LF is being honored for the revisions and expansions he has accomplished in the ARRL antenna book in its chapter, Effects of Ground. He is credited with helping to open up the 630 and 2200 meter bands as the holder of an experimental license. Philip Gladstone, N1DQ, is being recognized for his role in citizen science and ham radio. The Gladstone Signal Spotting Challenge bears his name. Philip is the creator and maintainer of the PSKReporter.info website, also known as the Digimode Automatic Propagation Reporter. Finally, Paul Schreier, HB9DST/AA1MI, is being honored for his active role in Summits on the Air and his efforts as a board member of the Helvetia Telegraphy Club. He is also a top organizer of many events, including the World High Speed Telegraphy Championships held in 2012.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.TWIAR.net.
This is Spectrum from the Northwest on VK7AX with relays on VHF and UHF.
Teachers are gathered from around the United States to learn about amateur radio and how to use it in their classrooms as part of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details.
The 2024 cohorts of the ARRL Teachers Institute, TI, on wireless technology have begun. The first group of members for the year are returning teachers participating in the second round of learning, known as TI2. TI1 was amazing, immersive experience that broadened my knowledge of wireless technology, electronics, and amateur radio. I implemented ideas and applications from the very first day of the workshop within the first week of my return to school, said Everton Henriquez, KD2ZZT, a teacher from Staten Island, New York. Attending TI2 would further invigorate my teaching practice and allow us to do more cool projects, he continued. TI2 takes things a step further from basic radio principles. It builds on what they learned in the previous year and really exposes these teachers to advanced remote sensing technology, said ARR Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. TI also includes a demonstration of telemetry data gathering from amateur satellites, basic amateur satellite operation, and a discussion of applications of the satellite data to math and science topics. TI2 participants will also learn how to do Arduino programming and remote sensing. The ARRL Teachers Institute is easily one of the best classes I've ever taken. The hands-on projects were phenomenal, and everything I learned in TI1 was useful with my club and in the classroom. TI2 is raising the bar, and I already have a ton of things I will do next year based on this course. I am deeply grateful to the ARRL for this opportunity. All that said by Dr. Chris Brown, W9XBS of the Alabama School of Cyber Technology and Engineering. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is funded entirely by donors through the ARRL Education and Technology Program. Learn more at www.arrl.org/TI. There are 7 TI cohorts this summer. It costs teachers a $100 application fee to attend. All travel, lodging, and other costs are covered by the generous donors to the program.
NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, has been making a concentrated effort to track and identify objects that might be high-altitude weather, research, or hobbyist radio balloons, such as those launched by amateur radio clubs and school groups. NORAD is now studying numerous websites to determine, as best it can, what balloons are flying over North America at any given time. U.S. fighter jets shot down 3 hobbyist balloons in 2023 after detecting and shooting down another high-altitude balloon, which the government department identified as a spy balloon from China. Stephen Armstrong, NORAD's chief of strategic engagement, told the military website Task and Purpose that NORAD is now taking a closer look at raw radar returns to ensure more hobbyist balloons don't meet the same fate. NORAD now reaches out to hobbyist or researcher groups when it is practical to do so. It seems to be working. Armstrong said that in April, NORAD confirmed there was a hobbyist balloon that had been launched but concluded it did not pose a threat.
The YASMI Foundation is a nonprofit corporation organized to conduct scientific and educational projects related to amateur radio, including DXing and the introduction and promotion of amateur radio in underdeveloped countries. Recently, the YASMI Foundation announced its 2024 award winners. Congratulations to Rasa Skrinikova, R1 BIG, who is being honored by YASMI for her YouTube channel, YL Rasa, which educates and entertains its more than 15,000 subscribers and spreads goodwill by welcoming newcomers to amateur radio. Other winners include Randy Hall, K7AGE, who is being recognized for his substantial library of YouTube videos and has, according to YASMI, exemplifies the ham radio mentor. Rudy Severns, N6LF, is being honored for the revisions and expansions he has accomplished in the ARRL antenna book in its chapter, Effects of Ground. He is credited with helping to open up the 630 and 2200 meter bands as the holder of an experimental license. Philip Gladstone, N1DQ, is being recognized for his role in citizen science and ham radio. The Gladstone Signal Spotting Challenge bears his name. Philip is the creator and maintainer of the PSKReporter.info website, also known as the Digimode Automatic Propagation Reporter. Finally, Paul Schreier, HB9DST/AA1MI, is being honored for his active role in Summits on the Air and his efforts as a board member of the Helvetia Telegraphy Club. He is also a top organizer of many events, including the World High Speed Telegraphy Championships held in 2012.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
2 years after Furkan, TA7H put his home country of Turkey on the POTA map, the Parks on the Air program in Turkey has been growing bigger and younger every day. In a country where only 67 of the 322 listed parks have been activated so far, younger amateurs have been taking up the challenge this year. Now, about half of Turkey's POTA activators are young amateurs, according to Ersan, TA1 EYE. Ersan said a quartet of 4 young radio operators in search of outdoor activities away from the radio interference of the city are now leading the way. TA3 TGC, TA3 LCK, TB3 BDV, and 4K 6IJ have operated in the parks around Bursa City using their club call sign YM3KB, then moved on with their radios into parks near other cities. Meanwhile, young POTA enthusiasts TA7YLY, TA7AZC, and TA7EK have been calling CQ POTA in the Black Sea region. Ersan said this trio also did some of the earliest activations the year POTA began in Turkey. Furkan was inspired to bring POTA to Turkey after operating from the U.S. as W7AOF and quickly logging parks in all 50 states. He received the names of the national and nature parks from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, collected the necessary data for them, and processed them for the POTA database. This year, to further nurture POTA in Turkey, the The website, tadx.org, was launched to show the parks listed in Turkey and the team's park-related activities. It can only get busier.
From W2XBS, you are listening to the weekly amateur radio news and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, on the K2RHI repeater in Troy, New York.
From Wynyard to Waverly, Stanley to Scottsdale, this is VK7AX.
And finally this week, ever played poker over FT8? Well, some amateurs are using FT8 as a gaming platform. With all the details, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this special report.
Well, YouTuber Steve McCrane, KM9G, and his friends at the YouTube channel Coffee and Ham Radios do just that. They even live stream it monthly on the channel Frequency Frenzy. They devised a system of automatically assigning values to QSO data from amateur radio digital mode contacts that corresponds with playing cards. The www.frequencyfrenzy live website uses the contest rules to display each participant's poker hand. They run the events as sprint contests. Often they are in the same room together as they operate and play poker. One of the things we had chosen FT8 for was we could have camaraderie and bring us together as a group, said McCrane. The possibilities don't end at poker, though. Since their contest rules just assign values from the QSOs, many games could be incorporated into that activity. Bingo is one that's in development. It's not just fun games. It's meant to engage people who otherwise may not be interested in amateur radio contesting by visualizing the real-time contest standings throughout the game. McCrane says recording the points and data in real time is an important aspect of modern contesting. McCrane presented his experience in the forum Gaming the Amateur Radio Digital Modes at the 2024 ARRL National Convention hosted by Dayton Hamvention. A video of that presentation is available at ARRL HQ YouTube channel as part of the 2024 National Convention playlist. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
If you've ever done a state QSO party, you don't know what the results are, whether you won, whether you placed, where you placed, for sometimes a month. With many digital natives accustomed to instant gratification, the gamification schemes make radio contesting appealing to a younger generation.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters across the country and around the world on great repeater systems like the VK7RDR repeater on 439.775, also on digital amateur television on 445.500 on the VK7AX H.264 AT repeater serving Ulverstone in Australia, and also via relay on the VK3 RBO DVB-T HD amateur television repeater, also on 445.500 serving Bendigo, Victoria, Australia, and also on the VK3 CE members video stream. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.